What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here, back with another week one preview. And man, we've had 2 full days of previews, and we're getting into probably the biggest games of the weekend today. And we're kicking it off with number one Alabama facing the number 14 Miami Hurricanes in one of the biggest matchups of the week. But I mean, as you can tell in the bottom, as we're recording, the spread is Alabama 19 and a half. 19 and a half point favorites for the Crimson Tide. This game kicks off at 2:30 p.m. Central Time on ABC. And for me, this matchup is huge in terms of storylines because we're going to get a lot of questions answered about one, Alabama, who's the odds-on favorites right now to repeat as SEC champions, one of the best teams in the country, and then also Miami, who is right there with North Carolina as probably the top competition for Clemson in the ACC. So we're getting answers to two huge, competitive, important teams in the landscape of college football. And for the Crimson Tide, let's be honest, it boils down to Nick Saban trying to continue and expand and grow the most impressive dynasty that college football has ever seen and might ever see. And for me, the biggest storyline is Bryce Young taking over that QB1 spot and all the new weapons around him that must step up, given the exodus of absolute talent at wide receiver that has left over these past 2 years. They got some great guys returning. We'll get into all that soon. And for the Miami Hurricanes, they're going to be led by one of the best and most experienced quarterbacks in the country, D'Eriq King, coming off a horrible, I believe it was an ACL tear in the bowl game against Oklahoma State. But the defense has a few question marks, but they returned 18 of 21 starters from last year. And Manny Diaz is looking to start the season with one of the biggest potential upsets in college football in Atlanta. And, I want to start with the keys for Alabama. For me, it is so simple when you look at what the key for Alabama is, because the literal key is just keeping things simple for Bryce Young. He doesn't have to play outside himself. He doesn't have to play outside the offense. This is Bill O'Brien's first game calling the plays, running the offense since Steve Sarkisian went down to Austin, Texas. But for me, the key is keep it simple, protect him with one of the best offensive lines in the country, and let him just distribute the ball to the playmakers outside in space on this offense. When you look at Young, I know he's the highest rated quarterback Alabama's ever signed. He was the number one player for 247 in the country, the number two player in the composite, and was the Max Preps Player of the Year or Co-Player of the Year, because I believe DJ split it with him, quarterback over at Clemson. But when you look at what he did in high school out there in California, over 13,000 yards passing, 152 passing touchdowns with 26 rushing touchdowns, and only 21 turnovers, only 21 picks in 4 years out there in California. And yes, he can be special. He can do special things. But in such a big game in your first ever start, I think Alabama, Nick Saban, Bill O'Brien are going to keep it simple and let him play within the offense until he gets his rhythm going. And then I think you're going to see Alabama unleash him later in the season. But the reason I say keep it simple is you're surrounded by one of the best offensive lines in the country, and you have a loaded wide receiving room still, and the running back room with Brian Robinson, Jace McClellan, and the I guess there's probably like 4 backs that would probably be RB1 just about anywhere in the country. Why would you risk, kind of getting his confidence down, feeding him to the wolves per se in his first ever start? As much as Alabama has lost talent, 4 first rounders out of that wide receiving room over the past 2 seasons, they still returned John Mechie, who played big time football after Jalen Waddle went down last year with his ankle injury. And then also, this is an addition that I think is going to play the biggest role, one of the biggest roles this year, but wasn't really talked enough about the media. And that's the addition of Jameson Williams from Ohio State to the wide receiving room of Alabama. He's an immediate deep threat guy. And him and Mechie, I think, are going to combine to be one of the scarier wide receiving duos in the country. And let's not forget what Aggie Hall did in spring camp in that spring game where he was just making plays in one-on-one coverage, adjusting to the ball well, showed how athletic he could really be. And Jojo Earl is another name I want you guys to watch because he reminds me of like this weird mix of Rondale Moore and Jalen Waddle combined. And I think he could be huge coming in the slot position for this Alabama offense. And really, he's going to have a lot of opportunities if he can find his way to the field because Aggie Hall, John Mechie, Jameson Williams, all those guys are going to have defenders' eyes. And so I think Earl's going to have a lot of one-on-one opportunities. And he's just so fast, so shifty, and so athletic that I think he's going to be able to find some open space and make some plays. And I can see him having a breakout freshman season, kind of like we saw Rondale Moore at Purdue 2 years ago have that great game against Ohio State. And I know the O-line had to replace some pieces, especially, Leatherwood and Landon Dickerson. But for me, there are some players with experience and others who are just so highly rated that it's still going to be a really good offensive line. Evan Neal at offensive tackle is probably going to be one of the top offensive linemen drafted next year. And then Javon Cohen, Chris Owens, who played outstanding at center in the college football playoffs after Dickerson went down. Emil Ekor and Kendall Randolph are the other guys who got starts. But I don't want y'all. I want y'all to remember these two names: J.C. Latham and Tommy Brockermeyer. Both of those guys are 5-star prospects. I think you could see them rotate in and out if the offensive line struggles early, which I don't think it will. And then Tommy Brown, a senior 4-star recruit who's been around the program, been a backup for the longest, has got some in-game experience, could be another guy to watch in terms of that second, unit for the offensive line, some rotational guys in case of injury and or bad performance. For me, the game plan is so simple for Bama. Limit the pressure on Young, let him play within himself, and there will be plenty enough opportunities for the Crimson Tide to win this game, especially with the defense that the Crimson Tide is going to put on the field. Bryce Young doesn't have to go out there and throw for 500 yards. Don't turn the ball over, get the ball to your playmakers, and just be consistent. That's all you have to do, and Alabama is going to be fine. Now, on this other side of the game, the keys for the Hurricanes are a little bit more complicated. For me, the key is to limit turnovers and protect De'Aaron King. The things that I saw with Miami last year, they were so great in 92% of the season last year. But when they played elite defenses or good defenses, this offensive line struggled and this offense really stuttered, and it cost them some games. And they even escaped some games that they probably shouldn't have won based on that offense, and especially that Clemson game last year. That was one of the worst offensive performances I think I have seen in a long time. You look at the two best defenses he faced last year. Statistically, it was Clemson and Pitt. Those were the two defenses, and he faced them back-to-back, which was even worse. And at Clemson, he only completed 42% of his passes for 121 and 2 picks, no touchdowns. At Pitt, he's still only completed 50% of his passes for 200 yards, had 2 picks, but he did have 4 touchdowns. But the key here for the offensive line in these games are they allowed 4 sacks each time. So they allowed 8 total sacks against these two defensive lines. And given Pitt had, I believe, 2 defensive linemen drafted, Clemson has arguably the best defensive line in the country with, Brian Barisi, Miles Murphy, Tyler Davis, all those guys over there. King has to play better, though, because this Alabama defense, for me, might be the best overall unit in the country. They remind me of that 2011 Crimson Tide defense. That was the last defense to allow under double-digit points a game. They allowed like 8 points a game or something like that. When you have a defensive mind like Saban, who is going to be in the defensive coordinator's ear, who's going to be able to pull up a good scheme, you're going to have to play one of your best games. And if you go out there and play like you did against Clemson, like you did at times against Pitt, even UNC at times, it's going to be a problem. And I'm going to flip it for a positive note for you Miami fans tuning in. I don't want to be all doom and gloom or anything like that. King is the perfect quarterback, though, to face Saban. He is a dual threat guy that can make plays with his legs and also make those outside the pocket. It's just I don't have any questions about whether De'Aaron King can live up to the hype in this game. The offensive line, though, is where I'm just concerned. And it's been a weak point for the Hurricanes for multiple seasons. And guys, I'm not just making this up. They allowed 26 sacks in only 11 games last year, which was a huge improvement. But the year before, they allowed 51 sacks in one season in 2019. 51 sacks. So in the past 2 years, they've allowed 77 sacks. That just cannot happen. They're going to have to be more consistent. They do return a lot. Navon Donaldson at the OT spot is probably their top offensive lineman. They got some really good, promising pieces. They just have to put a whole season together. Also like Jalen Rivers at the offensive guard spot. The offensive line has the experience. They have the chemistry now. They just have to put it together and show me they can hold up against a defensive line like Alabama's going to put up. If Bama consistently gets pressure on King, this game's out of hand quickly. And for me, that's what's going to separate and really determine if Miami is going to be, a top 20 team all year, or they're really going to be a contender for the college football playoff, be one of those top 10 teams. And for the matchup to watch, the easy way to put it would be the O-line of Miami versus this D-line of Alabama. But it's more the running game of Miami versus the front seven of Alabama. Cameron Harris returns at running back. Don Chaney Jr., Jalen Knighton are going to be the rotation, the guys behind him, according to the depth chart Miami released this week. Harris flashed so much potential last year, guys, especially with his back-to-back 130-yard performances early in the season. UAB Louisville dominated. But then after those first 2 weeks, Harris never reached 100 yards last season again. He's got to be better. He had horrible performances against the best defense of the best defenses, even some against defenses that weren't that good. 3 yards on 8 carries versus Clemson. 12 carries for 24 yards against Pitt. 8 yards on 8 carries against UVA, Virginia, who I don't even think is in the same stratosphere as what you're going to see this weekend at Alabama. If Harris can't effectively run the ball this weekend, the upset potential of this game greatly decreases for me. Because Bama, if they stop the run, the secondary is too good, and they're going to scheme up something. They're going to be firing after De'Aaron King. They're going to be able to make plays on the back end of that defense. Malachi Moore's a playmaker. Jordan Battle's a playmaker. You look at what they have with Josh Jobe on the outside as well. I think Kool-Aid McKinstry is going to get some time as well, especially possibly at the slot. These guys are ballers, and if you go back there and you allow Alabama to make you one-dimensional, it's going to be the same old story, same old Bama opening game where it's a blowout. So Knighton and Chaney and Harris are going to have to combine. One, two, or all three of them are going to have big games or combine to have a huge game. If you look at the history of Bama upsets, you have to rush for 100 yards. You have to run the ball. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had success running the ball. You look at Auburn in 2019, even though Tua was out, they were able to run the ball at times. You look at, Ole Miss, they were able to do some things on the ground. You look at 2017 Auburn, that Kerryon Johnson was able to run the ball. You have to run the ball, and your quarterback has to be a playmaker that avoids mistakes. If De'Aaron King goes out here and turns the ball over and they can't run the ball, Bama by 50. But for me, it's all about this offensive line, Knighton, Harris, and De'Aaron King. Can they go out there and make plays? You look at this Alabama D-line, DJ Dell, Brian Young, Phil Mathis are some of the best defensive linemen, especially interior guys in the country. They even got their edge guys who are specialized pass rushers, but like Christopher Allen and Will Anderson can still be factors in the run game. For me, it comes down, if Miami cannot run the ball and their offense is inefficient again, this isn't even a close game. I do think Miami is going to be able to keep this close early. Just right now, for me, I think Alabama's too strong on the defensive side of the ball. I think there's some turnovers made, some turnovers forced. And right now, I just think Alabama is better than Miami, top to bottom. I don't know. 20 points is a lot. I don't think they cover that spread. But right now, I have Alabama 41, Miami 24. That is my official prediction. Alabama 41, Miami 24. I can see it being close early. I just think Alabama is too deep right now. And I just think they got too much talent, especially in that front seven, where they're going to be able to get to De'Aaron King. They're going to be able to slow down the running attack. And for me, Miami does not have the playmakers at wide receiver and the offensive line to really hold up and get into one of these shootouts. So 41-24 Alabama this weekend, man. So comment below right now if you're still here. Comment below your score prediction. Comment below your thoughts on the game. And also, man, please subscribe. We'd love to have y'all on the channel. We got great content coming, more previews coming later today. And you can go back over the past 2 days. We've have over 6 previews already for week 1. We're previewing. Our channel previews the most games every week for college football. We give y'all the most in-depth breakdowns. We give y'all the most content, high quality content at that. So make sure to subscribe, man. Definitely appreciate that. But guys, until our videos later and this weekend, man, the Blue Bloods are out for right now.